Hi, if you can hear me, this is Chris Fish from McAllister and Quinn. It's 3:56 our time. We're just going to give this about 5 more minutes, and then we should be beginning the webinar. Hey, Casey, can you just email, text Vinny or Lori or Nancy? I think Lori's having some issues in terms of getting on as a presenter. She might need the access code with the PIN number.
Sure, give me 1 second.
Folks, if you're just joining the call, it's 4 o'clock. We will be getting started momentarily. We're just waiting for additional people to join. Hi, Lori, are you able to join yet?
Let's see. Says she's logging in right now. Let's see if that link worked for her. I'm going to just resend her email, and she'll be good to go.
We're just going to give it a couple more minutes, folks. We're going to be starting momentarily. Thanks for your time. Just bear with us for a couple of minutes.
Hello?
Hi, Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Yes, hi. Here we go.
Lori, we're live. We have everyone on. If you need a minute or two, if you'd like to open up, we'll turn it to you.
Sure. Well, thanks everybody for your patience. Unfortunately, I'm showing my stripes here with my challenges in logging in, but I want to thank everybody for joining. I'm really excited to be able to host this. I'm Laurie Villasuso, the CEO of the Orange County IDA. In this crazy climate, we're doing everything we can at the IDA to support our business community. We've been actively working with companies to produce personal protective equipment. We are counseling and assisting companies in assessing options and recreation of their businesses, during this coronavirus crisis. We today are sponsoring a webinar about the federal programs that are designed to assist workers and businesses. We've arranged to engage McAllister and Quinn, who are the two gentlemen you're about to hear speak, which is a Washington, D.C. consulting firm, provides comprehensive range of services. They have a diverse group of clients, but they deal quite extensively with the federal government and have fully familiarized themselves with the available programs. So we're very excited that they are here with us, and we're excited that all of you are on the webinar as well. We hope everyone is safe and healthy, and I will turn it over to Casey and Chris if you guys would like to kick it off.
Thank you, Lori. And this is Chris Fish, and we're going to walk you through, folks, today roughly about 18 slides in terms of the federal incentives that are now available through the stimulus. A lot of these that obviously your companies can take advantage of. We'll also talk a little bit about the stimulus. This is the third stimulus. We do expect additional stimuluses in the future. For McAllister and Quinn for this presentation, Jay Pardoon is going to be on with us. He's our Director of Federal Affairs. He'll be walking us through some of the depth of some of these programs. And Casey Newell is on as well. Casey, you want to just walk us through the agenda?
Yeah, sure. So, folks, some of the items that we're going to be covering today, we're going to start with just an overview of the CARES Act, which is the recently passed federal economic stimulus package responding to COVID-19. And then moving in further, we're going to start delving into a few specific SBA programs that are going to be of specific interest to small businesses, particularly the Small Business Administration SBA 7A Paycheck Protection Program and you might hear us refer to it by its acronym PPP. And then the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL program, and the grant that is associated with that. We'll also cover a few other federal resources for small businesses and some business and labor provisions in the CARES Act. We'll also touch on some of the SBA resources close to all of you in and around Orange County, and then we'll finally have a dedicated section at the end for questions and follow-up.
On this slide, just for the federal economic stimulus package, just a quick summary. On March 27th, Congress passed and then the president did sign into law a $2 trillion economic stimulus package. Casey refers to it as the CARES Act. And this is going to have in it about $350 billion in SBA, Small Business Administration, loan guarantee and subsidies, for your companies to take advantage of. Again, for the stimulus, this is the third stimulus package that the federal government has passed into law related to COVID-19. We do expect additional support after this as well. We go to the next slide. Casey mentioned a number of the instruments that we're going to go through specifically in terms of programs available for your companies to take advantage of. The first one is the Small Business Administration, the 7A Paycheck Protection Program. This is really geared for small businesses, the definition being under 500 employees, with capital to retain employees and reduce or prevent layoffs. So this program is really in place to ensure that you don't lay off workers. The program provides up to about $10 million to qualified small business and nonprofits. They provide PPP loans that are intended to be forgiven, granted that the borrower maintains the workforce and complies with the programmatic request of the program. So more or less, you can secure funding out of this program and you won't have to pay it back as long as you retain the workers and you use this funding to actually pay for their salary. The program will be obligating about 10 times the amount that the SBA usually underwrites, outside of COVID-19 time for this program. The reason we just bring this up is there's going to be quite a bit of volume of applications for this program. We're going to walk you through the application process, how you actually apply. If it's a program that fits for your company, we're going to suggest that you apply very, very quickly so you get your application in as soon as possible. The other point we would just make is they're going to start processing applications actually tomorrow now on April 3rd. So this program will be up and running, very soon. Disclaimer at the end, the exact terms of the loans will be determined solely by the lenders. So in summary, and we'll walk through this in some more detail for the application process, this is a program through the Small Business Administration that provides a loan guarantee to an SBA certified bank that is going to be in Orange County that you would get a loan from. And then if you use this loan as it's intended in terms of paying your workforce, you're going to be able to actually forgive the loan and use this more or less as a grant.
Maybe just to follow up on a few of Chris's points, he mentioned the lender. It goes through a qualified financial institution, and SBA just underwrites the loan. So just wanted to make that clear up front. You do have to reach out to a qualified lender, as Chris mentioned. SBA just underwrites and guarantees the loan. The loans can be up to $10 million. That's the maximum amount. That's not necessarily what the total amount you would be eligible for. The total max loan amount is determined by a calculation which is based off of your average monthly payroll costs during a period between February 15th of 2019 and June 30th of 2019. And it's 250% of your average monthly payroll costs. So, for instance, if your average monthly payroll cost is equal to $100,000, the maximum loan amount you'd be able to get is $250,000 for the loan. There are some strings attached in terms of allowable uses for the loan program. So this can really just be paid for payroll costs. The loan money can just be used for payroll costs, healthcare benefits, insurance premiums. It can be used for utility payments. And then also for interest, but not the actual principal on existing mortgages, rent, and other debt obligations that you have incurred prior to February 15th of this year. The term and rate of the loan, it's a 2-year loan at a 0.5% fixed rate. And one of the new changes to this program for the Paycheck Protection Program compared to the existing SBA 7A loan program is that there's no collateral or personal guarantee required. So this is a 100% government-backed loan. Just in terms of eligibility, touched on it briefly, but it's small businesses, 500 employees or less. Includes nonprofits, so 501c3s and 501c19s. Also includes independent contractors, so 1099s, veterans organizations, and certain businesses, hospitality or service industries with over 500 employees, but less than 500 employees per physical location. Just in terms of deferment, and we'll walk through the loan forgiveness aspect that Chris had mentioned in prior slides. If you do not get the entire loan forgiven, there is a deferment for up to 6 months, and interest will accrue during that deferment time. But really what the interesting feature of this new program that was included in the stimulus package is the loan forgiveness aspect. So you're able to get this entire loan forgiven as long as you're complying with program standards. And the program standards are basically the amount spent by borrowers during an 8-week period goes towards the allowable usages that I went through on the last slide. And then during that time period, you can't reduce any of your workforce or the compensation of your workforce by more than 25% compared to the prior year. If you comply with those two elements, you're eligible to get the entire loan forgiven. So in that sense, it sort of acts as a grant program. As long as you're using the funds for allowable usages and you're maintaining your employment and the compensation of your employees during that period, you're going to get the entire loan forgiven. The unforgiven amount, should you not be able to comply with all of the requirements, would be carried forward as an ongoing loan. That this is when it becomes a loan, and that's the 2-year term and fixed rate of 0.5% that I mentioned before in the earlier slides. Get a lot of questions on, are there limitations to how many Paycheck Protection Program loans there are? Yes, you're only allowed to get one, and each loan will be tracked under the taxpayer identification number at SBA, so it's going to be very difficult to game the system and get another loan. But we do expect, as Chris mentioned, there's potential to have additional loan programs and money for programs such as these in future stimuluses. But this is how the program's set up for the time being. Other SBA loans, it is possible to receive other SBA loans outside of the Paycheck Protection Program, but you can't use another SBA loan for the same purpose. So they're really going to be strict about not double dipping. So if you take out a Paycheck Protection Program loan and it's going towards payroll costs, and you engage with another SBA loan program, it can't go towards payroll costs. It can go towards something else in terms of operating expenses, but not towards payroll costs. You can't take 2 loans out for the same purpose. I think just continued on in terms of the application for the PPP loan. These loans are going to be available through June 30th of this year, 2020. Chris mentioned you can start applying tomorrow, April 3rd. Small businesses and sole proprietorships. Self-employed and 1099s can start applying April 10th. And again, this is through an outside lender. There is an application form, a sample form at the link that's provided in the slides. The applications are submitted and processed by the local SBA qualified lenders, though. So you're not submitting the application form directly to SBA. You're filling out the application form, finding your qualified lender, and working with them on processing your application. Currently, the application process timeline is a bit unknown. They are going to be having to handle quite a bit more in terms of volume of applications and underwriting, about 10 times the amount they usually do. But we do expect that a streamlined process is going to be in place. But, there's a little bit of a lack of clarity on how many days or weeks from the time you put your application in until you receive funding that it's going to be. So we'll update just with Chris, Casey, and I. We'll be updating just in terms of new information as it comes out related to the timeline on that. What should you do next? I think just with the link for the application for applying for these loans, review the application, see what kind of information is needed, compile the information. And then really the most effective strategy would be to get in the front of the line and go and talk to your SBA qualified lender right now. There's probably going to be additional financial institutions that get approved to provide these loans, but I think just at the beginning of this process, going to a currently SBA qualified lender is your best bet.
Yeah, I would just add too, the IDA is going to have that list, and they will be making it available in terms of the qualified lenders for the program. Just moving on, the second grant that's available, the second loan program that's available from the Small Business Administration, it's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We're going to refer to this in the presentation as an EIDL. This is really to provide businesses with a quick infusion of cash to cover immediate expenses. And the program, just some highlights, and we'll get into more detail, upwards of about $2 million to qualified small businesses and nonprofits experiencing COVID-related economic distress. Each loan application, for this too, can also provide up to $10,000 immediately as a grant within about 3 days of your application being processed. So this loan is going to give you a small grant, as a beginning process. $10,000, would be sent to you within 3 days, again, of your submission being processed, and a quick infusion of funding to assist you immediately. The timing, this loan is up and running right now. So this is one you can apply for right now. And we'll get into the timeline in terms of the application review. And again, just disclaimer, they can change the details, are subject to change in terms of loan terms of the loan and determining, specifically by SBA. So this is run specifically by the Small Business Administration. There's no, lender involved. It's directly with the SBA. And again, a quick infusion of cash. And the loan, whatever you get dollar amount, this can be used for other applications outside of payroll, which we'll get into as well.
Just to follow up on Chris's overview of the program, again, the lender here is directly the Small Business Administration. There's no outside lender involved in the process for these EIDL loans. The maximum loan amount is $2 million. That's not necessarily what you're going to be getting in the terms of your loan, but that's what the loan can go up to. Part of this program as well, which is a new feature that was created through the stimulus package, is while your loan is being processed, your loan application, you are able to receive an advance of up to $10,000 from the SBA while they process your loan. And this is going to be distributed within 3 days that you put your application in. And this advance does not need to be repaid under any circumstance. So it's basically money to tie you over while the loan is being processed. It's not a lot in a lot of situations, but it is something that they do provide in terms of an advance while you're waiting through the application process. Allowable uses. The EIDL program is much more broader in terms of the allowable uses. The first program we talked about, the Paycheck Protection Program, it's named for a certain reason. It's primarily to just focus on payroll costs. This can be used towards a broader set of operating expenses. So, actual payments on existing debt obligations, rent payments, not just the interest on those, the actual principal as well. So this is a little bit more flexible in terms of what you can use the loan money for. The term and the rate are quite different from the previous program we were discussing, the PPP program. The term can be up to 30 years. It's a 3.75% annual rate for businesses and a 2.75% annual rate for nonprofits. Another difference between this program and the PPP program is that there is a collateral or personal guarantee involved if you take a loan out that's greater than $200,000. So if you take a loan that's greater than $200,000, owners that have more than 20% of the business or managing members, if you're an LLC, will need to provide a personal guarantee. However, there won't be any liens being taken against real estate owned by any of the guarantors. The SBA will place liens against the assets of the business as collateral. In terms of eligibility, small businesses and private nonprofits with 500 or fewer employees, sole proprietorships, independent contractors, cooperatives, employee-owned businesses, tribal small businesses, all are eligible through this program. So historically, most of these programs don't allow 1099s or self-employed or sole proprietorships to have as much access in terms of an eligibility standpoint. That's been changed. Those entities are now eligible. Just in terms of deferment, you can defer payment on the loan for up to 1 year. Interest will accrue during the deferment period. Again, there is no loan forgiveness with this program. This is different than the Paycheck Protection Program. So there is no loan forgiveness element. It is a true loan. It does not function as a grant if you meet requirements. There's no forgiveness aspect to this. Can you apply for an EIDL and a PPP loan? Yes, whether you've received an EIDL loan unrelated to the COVID public health and economic crisis, or you do receive an EIDL loan related to the crisis between January 31st of 2020, June 30th of 2020, you can also apply for a Paycheck Protection Loan. If you do ultimately get one of those, you can refinance the EIDL loan into a PPP loan. And any of the amount of the EIDL grant program, the $10,000, would just be subtracted from the amount forgiven through the Paycheck Protection Program. And so, you know, it's possible that there is a setup in terms of refinancing EIDL loan into a PPP loan. However, you cannot use, again, there's very strict no double dipping requirements. So you cannot use an EIDL for the same purpose as your PPP loan. So you cannot pay for payroll costs with two different SBA loans.
Oh, sorry.
And then just the application process for the EIDL loans. This is going to be open through December 31st of 2020. Following that, it's going to revert back to its original program requirements in terms of eligibility. You know, the $10,000 grant is going to go away. All of that's in place until December 31st, however. You can apply right now. We're providing a link in these slides to where the application form can be accessed. Right now, what we're seeing in terms of processing times for these loans is ranging between 2 and 3 weeks. And again, that the $10,000 grant would be coming your way within 3 days of your official submission of your application. So just in terms of what you should do next, you know, review the EIDL application, see what information is required in order to complete the forms, and then begin, you know, actually submitting the application. I know we just going through those slides, there's a lot of information thrown at you just related to the differences between both of these programs, the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL. These are the primary loan programs that the Small Business Administration is going to be using for small business loan relief through this economic stimulus package, and we're confident, you know, moving forward as well. These are going to be the two programs they have put in place. Just some of the difference here, and we kind of touched on this, but the Paycheck Protection Program, you know, is named accordingly, and it's primarily towards giving small businesses funding to keep workers employed. That's the main element to this. There is the forgiveness aspect to the loan program as well. So if you meet all of its requirements, it essentially functions as a grant. So that's an attractive feature. The EIDL loan program is really geared primarily towards a quick infusion of funding for small businesses to use on operating costs with you know, a broader range of usages in terms of, you know, it could be paying off debt obligations, mortgage payments, rent. It's not just for payroll. But there is no forgiveness, loan forgiveness aspect here. It is in every sense a true loan in terms of the terms and rates and lack of forgiveness program. Both programs essentially by tomorrow are going to be live. The EIDL program might be a quicker turnaround, just in terms of it being an existing program in place that it has had a live application for a little while now, whereas the PPP program is just being rolled out. Again, businesses can apply for and receive both the EIDL and PPP loan, but you cannot use the loans to pay for the same things. Just a recommendation on our part, if your small business requires very urgent assistance, and there's a lot of needs outside of just using or receiving funding to help people employed in terms of payroll costs, the EIDL program might be better suited, just because of the broader range of uses for the funds, the $10,000 advance, and you know, we're expecting the application process to be a little bit quicker with the EIDL program since it's an existing program.
So just to jump in here, there are a suite of other federal small business resources that are being funded and incorporated in the recent legislation. Just to highlight a few of these for folks, some of these include subsidies for existing SBA loans. So $17 billion is included in the CARES Act. And if you have a current pre-existing loan that you've taken out with the SBA, this will cover 6 months of payments for that purpose. Another provision includes $265 million for small business development centers for education, training, and technical assistance grants. These small business development centers, SBDCs, they are essentially local liaisons with the SBA. They're mostly volunteer-led by local financial experts and stakeholders. And while the funding won't be provided directly to businesses themselves, this will take the shape of programs being conducted by those SBDCs to benefit small businesses through training, technical assistance, other programs. There's also $50 million included for NIST manufacturing extension partnerships. Now, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, is a federal agency, and this manufacturing extension partnership program funds other centers that are mainly organized on a state-by-state basis. Now, Empire State Development's NYSTAR, a division within New York State itself, serves as the MEP office for New York. And what this effectively does is also provides the sort of training, technical assistance, education programs you might see at SBDCs, but on a larger, more statewide scale. There's also a handful of general business and labor provisions included in the recent legislation. One of these is a delay on the payment of employer payroll taxes. So this is going to defer the standard payroll Social Security tax that businesses are normally required to pay. This deferment will take place over 2 years, with half of the deferment being due on December 31st, 2021, and the other half being due on December 31st, 2022. There's also employee retention credits that are going to be available for employers. So this is going to provide a refundable payroll tax credit for 50% of wages paid by eligible employers to certain employees during this crisis. So it's going to be available to employers that include nonprofits, for-profits whose operations have been fully or partially suspended due to the current public health situation. And it will also be provided for employers who have experienced a greater than 50% reduction in quarterly receipts on a year-over-year basis. Wages of employees who are furloughed or face reduced hours as a result of closures or hardship are also going to be eligible for the credit. If you're an employer with 100 or fewer full-time employees, all of your wages are going to be eligible regardless of whether or not employees are furloughed. It's provided for wages, compensation, including health benefits, and is provided for the first $10,000 in wages and compensation paid for eligible employees. It's not going to be available, however, for employers receiving a small business interruption loan, which is something to consider if you were thinking about applying for that or already have. And the credit's going to be provided through December 31st, 2020. Now, we had touched on a couple locational resources, including the small business development centers and manufacturing extension partnerships. And we have contact information for the local ones near and around Orange County, or in the case of the MEP in Albany as a statewide resource. We've also included the New York City district office at the top here. And this is basically going to be the Small Business Administration's regional conduit for any type of assistance, consulting, resources they directly provide on a regional scale for downstate New York and the Hudson region. So these slides and a recording of this presentation, plus some more information in general on the recent legislation and its federal implications for small businesses, will be posted on the IDA's website. And Sarah Wilson and her email address is provided there, will be the conduit for any questions that anyone might have for the IDA, the accelerator, or off of this slide. There's also a function that you might notice on your GoToWebinar pop-up for questions. It appears at the bottom. And if you have anything that you wanted to ask throughout the presentation or just came to mind, please feel free to type that in and we'll address them one by one.
Yeah, I would just, as Casey's looking at maybe any questions that come in, I would just add, if you're going to take advantage of either of these two loan programs, our advice is to really start the application process now. They're going to be swamped with folks, putting in applications. So the sooner your application's in, the quicker it will be processed. The other point is your application is not competing against other applications. They're very much looking to fund, everything that they can to put more money back into companies and into the economy. So again, the sooner, your application's in, the better. And I'll just end by saying too, for the 7A, for the PPP 7A program, IDA will have that list of the certified banks. And our advice would be you should look at that list. And if your bank that you work with right now is not certified, you can reach out to them, but it's going to be quicker for you to work with a certified bank. So look at the certified bank list, talk to them, do the application. And again, potentially your bank, if it's not certified, might become certified, but it might take them a week. And then it might increase, the time, for your application to be processed and for that loan to come through. So I'll stop there and maybe back to Casey, Lori, if there's any questions that we can answer now.
Okay, so just to start with some of the first questions we received. Quote, I own a party rental business that is seasonal. How do we apply for loans when we have no business? So I think the question here is asking, what is a consideration that seasonal businesses need to make in terms of calculating what their standard or average full-time employment, workforce, and income might look like?
Good question. And Jake, jump in as well. What I would say to you is, if you're seasonal, are your workers seasonal? So if your employment count today is 0 and you're going to be hiring people back in terms of seasonal, work, it's hard to maybe take advantage of the PPP 7A program, but you might want to look at the EIDL. Again, not sure in terms of if your workforce is still with you, or, if you'll be hiring them back, once the season begins. The other point I would make is you do have time to go after this. If you don't need the, the funding, right now, these are going to be open, for your availability to go after, through the end of the year. So depending on when your season starts and ends, you might have some flexibility on the timing. Jake, I don't know if there's anything to add.
No. I think just maybe it's something offline in terms of how you in terms of the payroll that you do pay. I think it's pretty flexible in general. Is I guess the only thing I would add. So even if you're self-employed or you're 1099, you're eligible for this program. So I think just maybe it's something that we can one-on-one see what your current situation is in terms of your business being seasonal and everything, and what would count and what wouldn't. But I think it's, everybody's going to be eligible as long as you're not a larger business or, a division of a larger business type of a situation. So I don't think it's going to affect eligibility. I think it's just going to be an accounting exercise in terms of, 250% of whatever your monthly costs are. And I think just a little bit more details, and happy to help out with that. Just if you provide more details on that.
Okay. Another question, and this is one that Chris and I have actually been working with the EIDL on, so maybe I'll start off with an answer on it. Is there a list of lenders? So the SBA is the main resource for identifying local qualified lenders, and we've been working with the EIDL on identifying that list and helping them sort through what ones will be participating in these programs, and what ones won't be. The EIDL, I believe, is making that available and will be updated as the situation evolves. Chris, if you have anything to add to it.
Yeah, no, I think as that list, guys, as we have that list, I think with the EIDL, they will have it if it's on their website, or if you're going to contact the folks, contact Sarah at the EIDL. To Casey's point, as they add, additional banks to the list is going to grow. And they will have to add additional banks. Just the number of loans that they're going to have to process, it's going to be, rather quite high. And the folks that are certified now won't be able to handle all of it. Again, that's why I think the sooner we can get applications in, the better.
All right. Another question. Will the application for the PPP program open tonight, Thursday at midnight, or tomorrow, Friday at 9 a.m.?
I would err towards tomorrow at the opening of business. The application form, in terms of a sample of the form, is available already. In terms of, you can see what information is required and begin, starting the process. I would say it's 9 a.m. tomorrow. It's the opening day of business, April 3rd for the lender. So there's not really anything you can do midnight on Thursday in terms of going to, your financial institution and beginning the process with them. So I think if I'm answering the question right, it would be Friday morning tomorrow.
Yeah, I just monitor it and look at it. The only other thing I would add too is the links that we're providing you, these are active links. And if April 3rd comes, you go to the link and the link's not working, the link might be a little overloaded in terms of the number of people, going after it. So I think too, just, technically there might be some technical issues just going through this process. Again, just the number of people, the volume, that are going to be on these websites looking at these applications. It's going to be quite a bit. So I guess check it frequently, and hopefully you can get on it rather early. I would just add too, we've done a lot of these webinars around the country, and I think too, hopefully this is going to be helpful for you, just understanding all of this, because frankly, I think there's a lot of folks that don't. And we want everybody to be helped, but the more information you have now and the quicker you get those applications in, I just think you're going to be in a better position.
All right. Another question. For businesses that are currently completely shut down with all staff laid off, will they need to restart up their payroll for the formerly laid off staff before the loans are processed?
They would need to by June 30th, which is the covered period of the whole Paycheck Protection Program. Outside of that, the EIDL program would be able to fund payroll costs. Obviously, there's not the forgiveness mechanism there, but they're going to waive, if you've already laid off employees or reduced compensation for employees, as long as you restore it before June 30th, our understanding is that's going to be fine in terms of qualifying for the forgiveness. But if you're not able to do that, then, the PPP is going to turn into an actual loan. And then the EIDL, which is another option, would be a loan straight away. So I think, there's a possibility if you're able to get the funding through the PPP program to restore your workforce, and that wouldn't count towards not qualifying for the forgiveness of the program. But if you're not able to do it by June 30th, then probably would be an issue there.
All right. Let's see here. Seeing a few questions here also, just to touch on this as I go down the list on the IDA website. Before the end of this presentation, I will choose a question and respond to all with the website's address, which will be made available to all viewers. Now, another question. As a sole proprietor, how do I recoup the money I would have been earning myself as employed earnings?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, it's a self-employed person, and how would you recoup the money that you just haven't gotten in a prior period? I don't know if there's going to be a mechanism for that. I mean, both the EIDL and Paycheck Protection Program would be open for you, but I think that money would go towards you just paying keeping to pay your salary. And another thing to mention, just on the allowable payroll costs, it will only cover up to $100,000. So it's not, this program is not designed to basically subsidize the salaries of executives or anything like that. It's more to get the population either back to work or keep them at work. So I think there might be some mechanism, and that's maybe something to reach out if it's a PPP loan to the actual lender or your SBA district office to see, just in terms of the fine print details on how you might be able to use the funding to recoup losses, February 15th onward during the covered period of the program. So I think maybe consulting the district office in New York, calling to verify if that's something that you can use the funding for is probably the best bet. But you should be able to, in terms of using the PPP program, to restore the money that you would be making. Should coronavirus not have affected your business.
All right. Another question. How do the owner, officers, and shareholders' salaries factor into any of the assistance? Do they count towards eligible payment for payroll or health insurance costs?
Yeah, so I sort of answered the question a little bit in the prior question. Up to $100,000 would be covered as a payroll cost for both the calculation of how much of a loan you can get, the maximum loan amount you can get, and then also for the forgiveness aspect of it as well. It's just up to the $100,000 limit. So, it's not you can't count the $1 million salary of a CEO or anything towards your maximum loan that you get, or in terms of the forgiveness.
All right. Another question from a business owner who applied for an EIDL loan on Tuesday, but still hasn't heard anything back, even including a basic confirmation. Should they take the initiative to reach out to them? Yes,
I would definitely reach out to them, especially if there's not, and I don't know what confirmation means, if that means there wasn't even an email confirmation or anything like that. If they haven't heard a word at all, that's another issue I think I would take up with the SBA district office in New York City.
All right.
Also, this is Laurie. I'm sorry. I just want to add, too, that for anybody listening that does have issues, we also will be able to help navigate some of those challenges or problems. So while the going to the district office, I'm sure it will take a long wait time or whatever, if we can aggregate some questions, if it's not specific to one business, we are also looking to help with that. So the contact that is on the website now at the Sarah Wilson, we have other staff who's also dedicated to help guide people through the process. So if there's anything like that, we'd also be willing to help with any of those questions, just as an FYI. And I see that Casey's now put out the IDA website, which is ocnyida.com. And on there, you can find there's a button to click for information, as well as our general email address and phone number. So you can reach us a number of different ways.
Thanks, Lori. That's going to be helpful for all the folks, too, who are connecting from outside of the IDA network. And actually, I just saw a really good question pop up regarding EIDL loans. So would EIDL loans be able to be used for purchasing equipment that they were not regularly able to access due to travel restrictions? So in other words, circumventing the extra costs associated with the lack of access to local equipment resources.
Good question. That's a really good question. Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think. No, I was just going to say, in general, you can't use either instrument for capital expenditures for equipment. But in terms of the issue that you just raised, it might be worth bringing up with the SBA directly. But for the most part, capital expenditures for equipment aren't allowed. But if you have a capital expenditure, prior to COVID, and you're making payment on it to pay that tool off, and you have debt, you then can use these instruments to pay that off. And the EIDL can pay off both the interest and the principal, where the PPP 7A is more maybe just for the instrument. But we can see on that too from here in Washington if we can help get an answer for you. But good question. I think that's a conversation with SBA.
All right. Another question regarding what qualifies as a payroll cost under the PPP program. Does workers' comp qualify under that program as a payroll cost?
I think I'm understanding that as if you're paying like a FMLA compensation. If that's the case, if it's related to coronavirus, I think it would qualify.
All right. And we have another attendee who saw online, not from an official source, that PPP is not available for farms. They were wondering if that's A, true, and B, if it is true, why that's so.
Yeah, this is Chris. I think this was something that we were looking at specifically for some agriculture implications. Our sense is the answer is no, but our sense though too is that there's certain agricultural aspects in terms of what you're farming, in terms of it being a product that's recognized by the Department of Agriculture. I think we're in pretty good shape. If it's something that still needs to be recognized as a farmable product by the Department of Agriculture, that's something that we're looking into. And Casey, Jake, any thoughts? We are not aware in the stimulus of any specific programs in agriculture, specific for farming, and that's something we can, take another look at, report back to IDA on. But again, I think if it's a small business, you should have opportunity. And we'll double check and get back to IDA if there's anything we're missing in agriculture department, which I don't think we are, but we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and I think just under the EIDL program, cooperatives are covered in terms of eligibility. So, that's not directly a farm, but if you're cooperative that you work with, it would affect numerous farms. If they're having issues, they would be able to qualify under the EIDL program. And to be honest, don't have a good answer on why it wasn't included in the program. Not privy to that information.
All right, and I'm seeing a series of questions from different attendees, basically stating that their local go-to banks are closed, both in person and in terms of remote contact. They're wondering what sort of approach they should take in looking for other alternative sources of SBA qualified lenders, and just referencing the earlier question we had on this, and Chris, please jump in, but our recommendation would be to use the IDA provided list of qualified lenders in the area and just get in touch with those lenders before you submit an application to them to make sure that they are open, because the situation is obviously going to vary bank by bank, especially regarding local branches.
Yeah, I would just add, I think for IDA and Lori, we're happy to help on this. I think it's probably a good idea. This is a really good question. I think it's a really good idea for us maybe to talk to the state of New York. If it's maybe, your state assemblyman's office or your state senator's office. I don't know off the top of my head what New York State has put out for essential, industries that can be open. I think banks are going to become essential in one way or another for this application process. And if they're not essential in the sense that people are going to be inside the bank, how do we work with these people online? So good question. And I think Casey's right, but maybe with IDA, Lori, we're happy to kind of walk through this with you guys. This might be something to check in with the state on to make sure that these
Absolutely.
banks, in one form or these banks are open for business in one form or another to process applications.
Yeah, I will, and I think that's great, and we will absolutely follow up with you on that and engage our leaders with that. Also, I will tell you that we've been contacting on our own a number of banks that we know as, the more local affiliates here, just to try to get an idea without having to just go through everyone else's experience. To be able to add to the list, we're reaching out to individual banks on a daily basis to make sure that if they're to see if they're participating, and then if they're not participating, to see if they're interested in helping them help guide them to that process. So we will follow up with you on that, guys, and make sure that we can get some sort of clarification on that.
Great. And again, everyone, that information, a great resource for accessing it is going to be the OCNYIDA.com, Orange County IDA website. And if you're having trouble accessing that web address, right above or below, the question function on your GoToWebinar pop-up, you'll see a chat bar, and the OCNYIDA website is posted there. Now, a question from an equestrian center, actually. They still have to pay maintenance costs, so in other words, veterinary fees, feeding costs for their animals, on top of paying staff to actually execute on that. They're wondering if any of those animal-associated costs might fit in with any of the allowable usages for either program we touched on earlier.
Yeah, I think with the EIDL program, the program with broader operating expense usages for the loan funding, I think that sort of thing would qualify in terms of an operating expense. For the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, that's a little bit more stringent in terms of it's really for the employees that you pay, and then there's a few other things in terms of the interest on your mortgage, rent payment, existing debt obligations prior to February 15th that you can use it for, and not the principal, just the interest in the PPP program. But I think it would be an allowable expense that you're using the loan funding for on an EIDL loan.
All right, and we have an attendee whose business is in New York, but whose bank that they use and would prefer to continue using is in New Jersey. Their bank is a New Jersey SBA approved lender. They're wondering if they would be able to continue using that bank for these programs, or if they would have to defer to a local option.
Yeah, no, they would be able to use that. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Go on.
No, I'm just saying, it's not specific to a state line or anything. So it's just if that's your company's existing lender for your company overall, and you have an existing relationship there, they're SBA qualified. Even though they're across the state line, I think they're the folks you want to talk to.
We have another attendee who runs a licensed and registered family child care program that does not currently have children in care due to the shelter-at-home orders throughout the state. But they're wondering if because their business is effectively shut down by a state ordinance, if they're still eligible to use the PPP program to cover payroll for their employees.
I would say yes, just off of the first, hearing the question, and that would be, something that would qualify in terms of COVID-19 related. So I don't see why it wouldn't be in that circumstance. But again, this is especially with the application form and the lender, it's something that has to be, the fine details gone through when they're preparing the loan package. So it might be something that comes up as an issue, but I don't see it being one. But don't want to give you 100% on that. But my reading of it is that it would be eligible in terms of you getting a loan as a self-employed or however you're classified, sole proprietorship, to be eligible for the program and receive funding.
We have another question from someone who is in the process of purchasing a business, and that process has now been put on hold and forced to halt because of the current public health situation. They're wondering if they would be eligible for any loans to cover the rent on the location that they are currently leasing out for the business that they haven't fully purchased. So in other words, they're asking any expenses that they're still incurring from business purchases and transactions that are stuck in stasis, if those are going to qualify under either of these programs, or if they have to be a fully established business.
I would think you probably have to be a fully established business if you're in the process of acquiring this business. I'm not sure if they're going to provide funding to pay for any of the rent of that facility or that business that you don't own. If it's a facility that you're buying and you have been making rent payments on it prior to COVID-19, and you're looking, you're looking now for assistance, to continue paying for the rent on the facility that you're buying, I think you might have an opportunity. Again, this was impacted on you by COVID-19. So if you were making payments prior and you don't own, it's a partnership or something of that nature, you might have an opportunity to look at. And maybe just one thing I'd mention too, some of these questions where maybe we can't give you, an exact yes or no answer, you should really look at the application. And, it's going to be hard, frankly, to get in touch with somebody from SBA. They're going to be swamped. And if you can't get in touch with them, I think what you really want to do is look at the application, look at the amount of time that it would take you to complete the application, and make a decision if you just want to send it in. So if you can't get, folks from SBA, on the phone to review, and you're unsure, our advice would be put the application in, and see what then happens. If you're working with the bank, with PPP loan, you should be able, hopefully, to talk to the bank. If it's EIDL and you want to talk to someone from SBA, it might be a little bit more difficult. But hopefully that gives you a little bit more guidance, a little bit more advice.
And another question that just popped up as a piggyback off of what you were saying, Chris. If someone has a question related to the 7A program, but is unable to get in touch with the SBA, would their bank, if their bank is qualified, if someone has a question related to the EIDL grant and loan, but is unable to get in touch with SBA, would their bank, assuming that their bank is an SBA qualified lender, be a good resource to answer that question?
I think if they're go ahead, Chris.
No, go on.
No, my sense there is, they're not going to process an EIDL loan. If they're SBA qualified, they might have, the lenders you're working with might have been trained or familiar with all of the SBA loan programs. So in that sense, they might have some familiarity with it. Outside of that, though, I couldn't say for sure if they'd be able to answer all your questions on the loan program that's outside of the PPP 7A program.
So I think that on that note, we've answered a lot of questions, and I'm sure that more are going to keep coming in. And I know that I've already repeated it, but again, we'd like to emphasize, please feel free to get in touch with Sarah Wilson. Her email address is provided on the final slide here for you to jot down, and will be available via this PowerPoint when it's posted on Orange County IDA's website, listed below in the chat. And she'll be working closely with us here at M&Q and other SBA resources. So we'll be able to get you these answers back over the next few days here, and I'm sure that a lot of them are going to come to mind after the fact. Now, any closing thoughts from you, Chris or Jake?
Well, Lori, why don't we turn it to you if there's any closing thoughts? And I would just mention, too, if some folks had an issue with, putting a question in, if you couldn't figure out how to, access the webinar to put a question in, we'll walk you through that in a second. Send questions in, and then, Jake, Casey will capture questions with Sarah. We'll try to get answers back to you. So we don't want to leave some, folks hanging if you still have questions. If you weren't able to get it in, try to send it in now. If not, you can reach out to Sarah. And to Casey's point, we'll try to follow up. Lori, should we turn it to you for maybe closing comments, or maybe anything we're missing that we think now we should be addressing?
No, I think you hit all of those salient points. I think the most important part is that anybody who's still on, if there was a question you had that was maybe very specific to your business or that just wasn't addressed, the conversation doesn't end here today. It's going to continue, and like McAllister and Quinn has mentioned, filtering your questions to Sarah Wilson. We'll go through all of them and get back to everybody. I think what's most important is that we understand how confusing and how much information is out there, and how difficult it can be to wade through this process. So for any issues that are still remaining or any uncertainties, our goal here is to make sure that you have sort of a navigator through this process, and we'd like that to be us. And, this is something that the IDA is taking very seriously, and we're not charging for. It's something that we want to make sure everybody has equal and unfettered access to. So just to piggyback on everything that the guys have said, anything that comes up, any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And like has been mentioned, this is going to be available on the website. So anything that you might want to go back and review, you'll be able to review the entire not just PowerPoint, but presentation is being recorded as well. So we anticipate that there will be more information coming out soon. And if it sounds like it's the right idea, we may do it again. And based on feedback, if there's something that you guys would like to see in the future, of course, we're open to that as well, because we understand how intimidating and overwhelming this process is. So I don't think that there's anything that we haven't touched on. I think we've had enough acronyms and, crazy government terms for one day, but we're certainly going to keep our eyes open for any new information. And we're grateful that everyone joined us, but we're especially grateful for you guys, McAllister and Quinn, for walking us through this. We know that it's clear that you know what you're doing here, and we're happy to have you as a resource. So thank you. I don't think that there's anything else to add.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.